At my wife's funeral, my son whispered, "I wish you had followed in your mother's footsteps." I stood up and said, "I'd rather do something else," and walked away. 30 minutes later, he panicked. 58 missed calls. "You won't believe what I did." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I stood beside the casket, my hand resting on polished mahogany that felt cold even through the white satin lining. Meredith looked peaceful. The mortician had done excellent work, better than I expected for what pancreatic cancer leaves behind. 2 years of watching her disappear, 1 cell at a time, 1 pound at a time, until the hospice bed became our entire world. The morphine drip, her final whispered words about being proud, about our life together, about how much she loved the garden we'd planted 30 years ago. Late afternoon light filtered through windows behind me, casting amber patterns across the funeral home's carpet. I could hear people shifting, preparing to leave. Mrs. Henderson from next door touched my shoulder. "Meredith fought so hard. 2 years. You never left her side." I nodded because speaking felt impossible. She squeezed my arm and moved toward the exit with the others. The crowd thinned. 20 people became 15, then 10, then just the stragglers who didn't know how to leave gracefully. "We should head to the house," someone said behind me. My house. The wake. I'd forgotten about that part. The drive passed in fragments. Trees, traffic lights, my hands on the steering wheel. Then I was standing in my own living room, surrounded by voices that seemed to come from underwater. People held paper plates with sandwich triangles and pasta salad. They spoke in those hushed tones reserved for the newly bereaved, voices full of careful sympathy. Amos stood in the corner near the bookshelf, Celeste beside him. They weren't talking to anyone else. Amos checked his watch, a Rolex I'd given him for his 30th birthday. Celeste scrolled through her phone, her thumb moving in quick flicks. She laughed suddenly, then caught herself, glancing around to see if anyone noticed. "Can we leave soon?" Her voice carried farther than she intended. "This is depressing. We're supposed to meet the Johnsons at 7. Amos shushed her, but not with any real conviction, just an automatic gesture. He checked his watch again. I moved through the rooms like a ghost in my own home, accepted condolences, nodded at stories about Meredith's kindness. Someone mentioned her volunteer work at the library. Another person recalled how she'd organized the neighborhood garden club. These strangers knew my wife better than my own son did. The crowd dwindled. 6 people. 4. 2. Then just family. I stood near the fireplace, staring at embers I didn't remember lighting. The mantelpiece held framed photographs. Our wedding day, Amos as a boy, vacations we'd taken when the world still made sense. Footsteps approached. Amos. He positioned himself between me and the door, blocking my view of the hallway. "Dad, we need to talk about the will." His voice carried no uncertainty, no grief, no acknowledgement that we'd just buried his mother. "Everything's still set up the way it was, right? You didn't change anything?" I turned slowly, looked at his face. Really looked. When had he become this stranger? This man who wore expensive cologne and impatience like matching accessories? "What did you just say?" The question came out quietly. "Dangerous." He shifted his weight, irritation flickering across his features. "Oh, come on. Don't play confused." He glanced at Celeste, who'd moved closer, forming a united front. "We've been patient. Living here, helping out, helping out." I repeated the words like I was testing them for meaning. "Yeah, helping. But let's be realistic." Amos crossed his arms. "Better if you'd followed Mom's path, old man. At least then we could finally live normally. We've been waiting long enough." Silence filled the room like water rising. I felt it in my chest, in my throat, behind my eyes. Not tears. Something colder, clearer. Celeste's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. I stepped forward. My hand had been gripping the mantelpiece. I hadn't noticed until I released it, until feeling returned to my fingers. I straightened my suit jacket, looked directly into Amos's eyes, held his gaze for 1 second. 2, 3, 4, 5. "I'll do something else instead." I walked past him, past Celeste, past the photographs on the wall that showed a family that had never actually existed, just a pleasant fiction I'd maintained through years of willful blindness, through the front door, down the driveway. My Mercedes sat where I'd parked it that morning, a lifetime ago. The engine started smoothly. German engineering. Reliable even when everything else crumbled. I backed out, shifted into drive, and headed toward the main road. The house disappeared in my rearview mirror. My phone buzzed in the center console. I picked it up at the first red light, held the power button until the screen went dark, and dropped it back into place. The Gulf Coast Highway stretched ahead, empty and dark, except for my headlights, cutting through the gathering dusk. I drove without destination, without thought, just following the white lines and the steady rhythm of the road beneath my tires. I drove for 2 hours, not thinking, just following the coastal highway until exhaustion forced me to stop. The Gulf Breeze Motor Lodge appeared like a mirage, neon sign flickering pink and blue against the darkness. Half the letters burned out, so it read, Gulbri Mo, or Low J. Nearly empty parking lot, single-story building that had probably looked modern in 1997. The clerk barely glanced up when I walked in. Young kid, maybe 20, absorbed in his phone. How many nights? Just one. I need somewhere quiet to think. He slid a registration card across the counter. I paid cash. He handed me a physical key attached to a green plastic diamond with 12 printed in white. Room 12. End of the row, farthest from the road. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. Single bed with a thin floral bedspread. Desk with a lamp and notepad bearing the motel's logo. Bathroom barely visible through a partially open door. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone on the nightstand where I'd placed it carefully, like it might detonate. Several minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 30. Time had become negotiable. I picked up the phone and held the power button. The screen illuminated, then exploded. 58 missed calls from Amos, 23 from Celeste. Text message notifications scrolled across the screen so fast I couldn't read them. The phone vibrated continuously in my hand. A desperate electronic heartbeat. I opened the messages. Started from the beginning. 6:47 p.m. Amos, Dad, where are you? This isn't funny. 7:23 p.m. Amos, you need to come back. We need to talk about Mom's arrangements. 7:45 p.m. Celeste, Norbert, please call us. We're worried. 8:15 p.m. Celeste, Norbert, Amos is really worried. Call us, please. 8:33 p.m. Amos, this is ridiculous. Answer your phone. 8:52 p.m. Amos, where the hell are you? 9:04 p.m. Amos, don't do anything stupid with the accounts. I know you're upset, but think clearly. I stopped scrolling, read that last message again. Don't do anything stupid with the accounts. Not, we're worried about you. Not, are you safe? Not, we love you, please come home. The accounts. I continued reading. 9:31 p.m. Celeste, we can work this out. Just come home and we'll discuss everything. 9:47 p.m. Amos, you're being childish? Mom just died and you're throwing a tantrum. 10:15 p.m. Celeste, Amos is driving around looking for you. Please respond. 10:43 p.m. Amos, fine, stay gone, but don't touch anything financial until we talk. My hands had stopped shaking. I felt perfectly calm, perfectly clear, like a surgeon standing over an operating table, seeing exactly where to make the first incision. I began scrolling backward through my memories instead of my phone. 8 years ago, Amos showing up with 3 suitcases and a story about a temporary setback. Lost his job at the dealership. Or was it that he quit? The details kept changing. Just until I get back on my feet, Dad. You and Mom have all this space. Temporary became permanent, became expected. Celeste appeared a year later. They married at City Hall. No ceremony, no celebration. We're keeping it simple, Amos explained. Celeste moved in without discussion. My house became their house, became our house, in every conversation except on the deed. The credit cards, Celeste borrowing them for groceries, then gas, then shopping trips. I'll pay you back, Norbert. Things are just tight right now. Tight for 8 years. Meredith had mentioned it once, gently. Maybe we should set some boundaries. I dismissed her concern. They're family. Family helps each other. The roof repair, $4,200. I wrote the check. Same month, Amos bought a new truck. $40,000. Great deal, he'd said. Couldn't pass it up. Every utility bill, every property tax payment, every repair, Every expense, every cost. Mine, while they contributed nothing but presence and expectation. Discuss? There's nothing to discuss anymore. You made your choice clear. I spoke to the empty room. My voice sounded different, harder, like it belonged to someone who'd finally woken up after years of sleepwalking. I took out my laptop from the car. I'd grabbed it without thinking when I'd packed an overnight bag I didn't remember packing. The motel Wi-Fi connected slowly. I opened a browser and began researching. Florida property law, tenant eviction procedures, estate planning, financial power of attorney, credit card fraud, adult-child exploitation. The notepad sat beside my laptop. I picked up the cheap ballpoint pen with the motel logo and began writing. Estate attorney, notary, bank manager, property deed documents, credit card statements going back 8 years, financial audit, change all passwords, contact credit bureaus, file police report if necessary. The list grew longer, more detailed. I organized information into categories: legal, financial, property, timeline. My phone buzzed. Another message from Amos. I didn't read it. Another from Celeste. Ignored. The phone kept buzzing, kept lighting up the dim room with each new notification. I turned it face down and continued working. Richard Kowalski. The name appeared in 3 different legal forms when I searched aggressive estate attorney Sarasota. One review called him ruthless but effective. Another said, hire him before your opponent does. A third mentioned he specialized in contested family matters and asset protection. Perfect. At 2 a.m, I lay back on the bed, fully clothed, staring at water stains on the ceiling that looked like continents from an atlas of nowhere. My phone buzzed twice more. I didn't move to check it. Morning light crept through thin motel curtains. I had 3 hours of sleep and a completely clear mind. First stop, the office of Richard Kowalski, the most ruthless estate attorney in Sarasota. 3 days passed in the rental apartment. Furnished, impersonal, temporary, everything I needed it to be. The place came with a 6-month lease I'd signed without hesitation. Downtown Sarasota, 8th floor, windows overlooking buildings I'd driven past for 30 years without really seeing. I unpacked a single suitcase filled with clothes from my office locker at the clinic. Nothing from the house, nothing that belonged to that life. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, screen dark. 63 missed calls in 3 days. I hadn't listened to a single voicemail. The appointment with Richard Kowalski was scheduled for 11. I arrived 20 minutes early, parked in the underground garage of his building, and rode the elevator to the 7th floor, carrying a leather portfolio stuffed with documents. The reception area had the quiet efficiency of expensive legal representation. Glass chrome, leather furniture that looked uncomfortable and probably cost more than most people's cars. A woman behind a curved desk looked up with a professional smile. Norbert Wallace, I have an 11 o'clock with Mr. Kowalski. He's expecting you. Would you care for coffee while you wait? No, thank you. She led me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Sarasota Bay. The water glittered in morning sunlight. Beautiful. I hadn't noticed beauty in years. Richard Kowalski entered exactly at 11. Tall, gray hair, suit that probably cost what I used to spend on family vacations. He shook my hand once, firm grip, then gestured to the table. Let's see what we're working with. I spread the documents across polished wood. Property deed, current will dated 2015, marriage certificate, bank statements going back 2 years, everything organized in chronological order, labeled with sticky notes. Professional habits die hard. Kowalski examined each page with the focused attention of a surgeon studying an X-ray. He made notes on a yellow legal pad. After 15 minutes of silence, he looked up. The house is entirely in your name. Purchased in 1988, correct? Before my son was born. Your son has no legal claim to the property whatsoever. He tapped the deed with his pen. None. This is solely yours. My phone vibrated on the table. Amos calling. I declined it. Kowalski noticed but said nothing. The will leaves your entire estate to your son. He flipped through the pages. Written 10 years ago. Standard beneficiary designation. 10 years ago, I assumed family meant something. I was wrong. The words came out flat. Factual. How quickly can we change it? New will can be drafted within days. Executed within a week. Kowalski leaned back in his chair, studying me with the detached interest of someone who'd seen every variation of family dysfunction. More important question, do you want to revoke their residence? I want them out, legally, permanently. What's the process? Florida law requires 30-day written notice for residents without a lease agreement. After that period, if they refuse to leave, we file for formal eviction through the court system. It's clean, it's legal, it's final. He pulled a blank form from his briefcase. I can prepare the notice today. My phone vibrated again, this time a text message. I glanced at the screen, then read it aloud. You can't just throw us out. This is our home, too. Interesting word choice. Our home, not your home. Kowalski extended his hand. May I? I passed him the phone. He scrolled through several messages, his expression unchanging. Keep all of these. Don't delete anything. This harassment strengthens our position if this proceeds to court. He handed the phone back. Is there anything else you want to address? I need financial forensics. I pulled out the bank statements, pointed to highlighted sections I'd marked the previous night. I believe they've been accessing my accounts without proper authorization, taking more than what I consciously gave them. Kowalski took the statements, scanned the figures, nodded slowly. I recommend Susan Berg, forensic accountant, exceptionally thorough. He wrote a name and number on his notepad, tore off the sheet, and slid it across the table. She'll find every dollar they've stolen. And it is theft, Mr. Wallace, regardless of family relationship. For the next hour, we discussed specifics. Eviction timeline, will revision requirements, documentation needed for financial investigation. Kowalski explained everything in precise legal terminology. No sympathy, no judgment, just clean presentation of facts and options. I signed paperwork authorizing him to act as my attorney of record, to request complete bank records, to begin drafting a new will that would leave my estate to a combination of medical charities and the public library where Meredith had volunteered. One more thing. Kowalski stood, gathering his documents into a folder. You'll receive pushback, threats, emotional manipulation, possibly public confrontation. Don't respond. Don't engage. Every communication goes through me now. Understood? Understood. We shook hands at the door. I left with a folder of preliminary documents, a scheduled follow-up in 1 week, and Susan Berg's contact information burning a hole in my jacket pocket. The elevator descended slowly. I pulled out my phone, found Berg's number, and called before the doors opened to the parking garage. She answered on the second ring. Professional. Efficient. We scheduled a meeting for 2 days later. Kowalski's words echoed in my head as I drove back to the apartment. It's clean. It's legal. It's final. That was all I needed. Susan Berg's office occupied a small suite in a professional building near the hospital. Wall of filing cabinets, dual monitors showing cascading spreadsheets, certificates framed on walls proving credentials I'd already verified online. She was 45, sharp-eyed, wearing reading glasses on a chain around her neck. I'd brought 3 years of statements, bank accounts, credit cards, tax returns, everything I'd retrieved from my home office safe during a carefully timed visit. When Amos and Celeste were out, I'd watched the house from down the street until I saw them leave, then let myself in, grabbed what I needed, and left within 10 minutes. Berg spread the documents across her desk like a dealer arranging cards. Give me a minute. I sat in silence while she worked. Her fingers moved across keyboards, pulling up additional records from bank websites, where I'd provided access credentials. She made notes on a yellow pad, highlighted certain lines, cross-referenced dates. The clock on her wall ticked through 20 minutes before she spoke. This supplementary card you authorized in 2020? She turned one monitor so I could see the screen. It's been used exclusively at luxury retailers. Total, across 3 years, $47,000. The number felt both shocking and inevitable. I authorized it for groceries and household emergencies. Show me one grocery store charge. Berg scrolled through pages of transactions. There aren't any. It's all personal luxury items. She read from the screen. Designer boutique, $3,200. Jewelry store, $8,500. Day spa package, $1,400. High-end cosmetics, $900. Her voice remained neutral, clinical. Every single charge is luxury goods or services. No groceries, no household supplies, No emergencies. Celeste. The name tasted bitter. The card is in your name with her as authorized user. Legally, you're responsible for every dollar. Berg flipped to another spreadsheet. But this is more brazen. She highlighted a column of transfers. Each one showed money moving from our joint checking account, the one I'd set up years ago for household expenses, into an account with only Amos's name. The notes beside each transfer read like variations on a theme. Temporary loan, will repay. Short-term assistance, emergency funds, paying back next month. Your son has withdrawn $83,000 over 3 years, each one marked as a temporary loan. Berg looked at me over her reading glasses. Not one repayment, not a single dollar returned. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. 47,000, 83,000, 130,000 total. Gone. Stolen. While I paid for everything else, mortgage, utilities, property taxes, insurance, repairs, while Meredith was dying and I was too exhausted to notice my accounts draining away. I want documentation for civil court. Every transaction, every unauthorized use, every fraudulent transfer. My voice came out steady despite the rage building behind my ribs. And I want every card canceled today. Remove his access to all accounts effective immediately. Berg nodded, already typing. This is textbook financial exploitation. You have grounds for full recovery, plus interest and legal fees. She printed page after page of highlighted transactions. I'll notify the banks this afternoon. All cards will be canceled by end of business. Account access revoked. I'll prepare a complete forensic report for your attorney within 48 hours. I photographed key pages with my phone. Documentation, evidence, proof that family was just another word for theft when you weren't paying attention. One more thing, Berg said as I gathered the papers. Change all your passwords, email, bank accounts, credit cards, everything. Use complex combinations they couldn't guess. Enable two-factor authentication on every account. I drove to the clinic for afternoon appointments, tried to maintain normal professional routine, saw patients, reviewed x-rays, discussed treatment options. Routine. Normal. Except nothing felt normal anymore. At 4:30, between patients, the waiting room erupted. I heard shouting first, then my receptionist's voice, strained and apologetic. Then Amos burst through the door to my examination area, face red, pointing his finger like a weapon. Dad, what the hell did you do? My card was declined. You blocked the accounts. I stood there in my white coat, stethoscope still around my neck from the previous patient. Through the open door, I could see the waiting room, 6 patients watching, expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment. You need to leave. This is a medical facility. You're throwing your own family on the street. His voice climbed higher, louder. What kind of father does that? After everything we've done for you. I picked up the phone on my desk, pressed the button for security, kept my voice calm, professional. I need someone to escort an individual from the building. He's disturbing patients. You can't do this. Amos moved closer, jabbing his finger toward my chest. You think you can just cut us off? Throw us out like garbage? We're family. Security arrived. Marcus, who'd worked the building for 5 years. He placed a hand on Amos's shoulder. Sir, you need to come with me. Take your hands off me. But Marcus was bigger, trained, and utterly calm. He guided Amos toward the door with professional efficiency. Amos shouted over his shoulder as he was escorted out. This isn't over. You'll regret this. Silence filled the examination area after the door closed. I could hear my own breathing, measured and controlled. Through the window to the waiting room, I saw patients shifting uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with each other. I walked out to the reception desk. 6 faces looked up at me. I apologize for that disruption. It won't happen again. I turned to my receptionist. Who's next? An elderly woman stood slowly, using her cane for balance. As she walked past the reception desk, she stopped, looked directly at me with sharp eyes that had probably seen everything life had to offer. That was your son? She shook her head slowly. Speaking to you that way? After a funeral? She didn't wait for an answer, just continued into the examination room, leaving her words hanging in the air like an indictment. I treated the rest of my patients without further incident. Professional. Focused. But my mind kept returning to the numbers. $130,000. 3 years, while Meredith was dying. That night, I drafted the eviction notice with Kowalski over the phone. 30 days. The law was clear, and so was I. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter in the rental apartment, addressed to my own house, 1247 Osprey Lane, the place where I'd raised a son who became a stranger. In the morning, I would deliver it personally. Morning light filtered through blinds I still wasn't used to. The rental apartment felt temporary even after a week. Furniture that belonged to no one. Walls painted neutral beige. Appliances that worked without character. The manila envelope sat on the kitchen counter where I'd left it the night before. 30-day eviction notice, prepared by Kowalski, reviewed by me, ready for delivery. I dressed in a dark suit, poured coffee I didn't finish, reviewed the documents one final time. Though I'd memorized every word, the drive to Kowalski's office took 12 minutes. I parked in the same underground garage, rode the same elevator, entered the same conference room. 3 folders waited on the table. 3 simultaneous strikes, Kowalski said without preamble. He opened each folder as he spoke. New will, eviction notice, civil suit for financial recovery. By week's end, they'll understand you're not negotiating. The new will was 32 pages. I read every paragraph. Everything to the Meredith Wallace Medical Foundation, a charitable organization Kowalski had helped establish specifically for this purpose. The foundation would provide orthopedic care for underprivileged children, free surgeries, free follow-up care, free physical therapy. Everything Meredith would have wanted. Everything that mattered. Nothing to Amos. 2 witnesses waited in the reception area, paralegals from Kowalski's firm. They entered, watched me sign, added their signatures below mine. The whole process took 4 minutes. 4 minutes to erase a son from inheritance. 4 minutes to choose charity over blood. The foundation will help children who actually need it, I said, handing the pen back to Kowalski. That's the legacy Meredith would want. He filed the document in his safe. Permanent. Irreversible without my explicit instruction. The eviction notice next. Do you want a process server to deliver it, or I'll do it myself? Kowalski studied me for a moment, and then nodded. Understood. I drove to the house for the first time since the funeral. Osprey Lane looked exactly the same. Oak trees lining the street, neighbors' yards well maintained, my own house standing solid at the end of the cul-de-sac. I'd bought this place in 1988, 37 years ago, before Amos was born, before I understood that family could become strangers under the same roof. Amos's truck sat in the driveway, new, expensive, purchased with money he'd stolen from my account while calling it a loan. I parked on the street, walked up the driveway carrying the manila envelope, my own front door, my own doorbell. I rang it like a visitor to my own life. Amos answered after 15 seconds. He wore athletic shorts and a t-shirt, barefoot, coffee mug in hand. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion when he saw me. "Dad, what are you—" I handed him the envelope. Didn't speak, just extended it across the threshold of my own house. He set down his coffee mug on the entry table, opened the envelope, pulled out the document, read the first lines. His face transformed, confusion melting into comprehension, then hardening into fury. "What is this? Eviction? You can't be serious. You have 30 days. The law is clear." I turned and walked back toward my car. Professional. Controlled. Surgical precision applied to family dissolution. "I'll fight this." His voice followed me down the driveway. "You can't just throw us out. This is our home." I got in my car, started the engine, drove away while he stood in the doorway of my house, still holding the paper that legally removed him from it. 4 days later, Amos hired Gregory Mills, a bargain attorney whose office occupied a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Mills filed a motion claiming verbal promise of inheritance and parental obligation to adult children. The preliminary hearing occurred on Tuesday morning, Sarasota County Courthouse, 3rd floor, Judge Patricia Hendricks presiding. I sat beside Kowalski at the plaintiff's table. Amos sat across the aisle with Mills, who shuffled papers with the nervous energy of someone who knew his arguments were worthless, but needed to justify his retainer fee. Mills stood, when called. "Your Honor, my client was verbally promised this inheritance. There's a moral obligation—" Judge Hendricks held up one hand. Counselor, verbal promises regarding inheritance hold no legal weight in Florida. Adult children have no inherent right to parental property. Does your client have any written documentation? Any signed agreement? No, Your Honor, but the moral... This is a court of law, not morality. Hendricks looked at the paperwork in front of her. The eviction notice follows proper legal procedure. 30 days written notice to residents without lease agreement. Everything is in order. Motion dismissed. The gavel struck once. Final. In the courthouse hallway, Kowalski shook my hand. Their attorney just wasted their retainer fee. The eviction proceeds as scheduled. Across the corridor, Amos glared at me. Mills spoke to him in low tones, probably explaining that no further legal options existed. Amos's jaw clenched. His hands formed fists at his sides. But he didn't approach, didn't speak. Just stared with the helpless rage of someone watching control slip away completely. That evening, my colleague Dr. Patricia Chen forwarded screenshots from Facebook. Celeste had created posts in a neighborhood group. Norbert Wallace is abandoning his family, throwing us on the street after everything we've done for him, after standing by him through his wife's illness. This is how he repays loyalty. The post included photos from Meredith's funeral, Celeste and Amos standing beside the casket, looking appropriately grief-stricken for the camera. But beneath Celeste's post, the comments told a different story. Margaret Kowalski, neighbor. I've lived next to Norbert for 15 years. He's the kindest man I know. Where were you two when Meredith needed help? Norbert was there 24/7. Dr. James Morrison, colleague. Norbert spent 2 years caring for his wife while maintaining his practice. I never once heard him complain. This post is manipulative and dishonest. Former patient after former patient. Colleagues, neighbors, community members, all defending me, all calling out the manipulation. The comments multiplied faster than Celeste could respond to them. Patricia Chen's text message said everything. Don't worry, everyone knows the truth. We've got your back. I texted back, thank you. Truth has a way of surfacing. 23 days remained until eviction. 3 legal strikes executed. Social media manipulation backfired. The law was working exactly as it should. My phone rang 2 weeks into the eviction period. Unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dad. Amos's voice. Different than before. Quieter. Can we talk? Just talk, please. 16 days remained until the sheriff would arrive to enforce the eviction. 16 days until legal became physical. What do you want to discuss? Meet me. Coffee. Anywhere you want. Just give me 30 minutes. I should have said no. Should have ended the call. But curiosity, or maybe some buried instinct about closure, made me agree. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the Coastal Roast downtown. He arrived 5 minutes early. I watched him through the window before entering. Amos sitting at a small table in the back corner, coffee already purchased, fingers drumming nervously on the tabletop. His clothes looked rumpled, facial hair growing unevenly, the expensive watch missing from his wrist. I entered, ordered black coffee, and sat down across from him without preamble. You wanted to talk. Amos looked at his hands. I know I messed up. I know things got out of control. Out of control, I repeated the phrase flatly. Is that what you call stealing $130,000? He flinched. It wasn't like that. It was just, we were struggling, and you had so much, and I worked for what I had, for 40 years, while you lived rent-free in my house and took whatever you wanted. I can pay some of it back. He looked up, desperation leaking through the attempted humility. Not all of it, but 50,000. I can get 50,000 together if you drop the lawsuit, and we can work out rent payments. Something reasonable. We just need more time. The math was almost insulting. 50,000 on a $130,000 debt, staying in the house with reasonable rent after 8 years of contributing nothing. No. Dad, please. My answer's no. His composure cracked. What are we supposed to do? We can't afford housing in Sarasota. Celeste is threatening to leave me. My boss saw what happened at your clinic. Half the office saw the Facebook posts. I'm barely hanging on to my job. Perhaps you should have considered consequences before stealing from me while your mother was dying. The words landed like physical blows. Amos's face reddened. That's not fair. What's not fair is that Meredith asked about you during her final week. Asked when you were coming to visit. I told her you'd be there soon. You never came. I was working. You were at a dealership holiday party when she died. I called you at 8 p.m. Told you to come immediately. You arrived at 11, 3 hours late to your mother's death. Amos stood abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Other patrons glanced over. You're never going to forgive me. Never going to give me another chance. You're correct? He stared at me for 5 long seconds, waiting for me to soften, to relent, to offer something. I stared back and offered nothing. He left, walked out without another word. His coffee cup sat abandoned on the table, still half full. I finished mine slowly, left a tip for the server, drove back to the apartment feeling nothing but cold satisfaction that I'd held firm. 3 days later, Celeste tried a different approach. The Remembering Meredith Wallace Facebook group had been created by Meredith's book club friends after her death. 43 members. Photos, memories, stories about her kindness. I'd been added but rarely checked it. Too painful to see her smile in every posted picture. Celeste posted a long message. Today marks 3 weeks since we lost our beautiful Meredith. I've been reflecting on how much she valued family. She always said family was everything. Norbert, if you're reading this, please remember what Meredith would want. She wouldn't want her family torn apart. She'd want forgiveness, reconciliation, love. Please honor her memory by giving us a chance to make things right. The post included a photo of Celeste and Meredith from 2 years ago, before the cancer became terminal, both smiling, happy. The manipulation was more sophisticated this time, invoking Meredith's values, using her memory as emotional leverage. It might have worked on someone who didn't know the truth. I waited 3 hours before responding. Let the post sit. Let people read it. Then I wrote my reply directly beneath it, visible to all 43 group members. Meredith spent 2 years in hospice care. Thanksgiving 2023, Amos chose a work party over dinner with his dying mother. December 2024, he visited 0 times during her final week. He arrived at her funeral 20 minutes late. Meredith died knowing her son couldn't be bothered to say farewell. Don't invoke her memory to justify your behavior. The response was immediate. Linda Chen, Meredith's book club friend. I visited Meredith every week during those final months. Norbert was there every single time. Exhausted but present. I never once saw Amos. Margaret Santos, hospice volunteer. I was with Meredith that final week. She asked for Amos. Norbert told her he was on his way. He never came. Norbert, you gave her comfort. Don't let them rewrite that. More comments flooded in, all supporting me, all confirming the truth. Celeste deleted her post within an hour, but screenshots had already circulated. That night, Kowalski emailed the final eviction order. Judge Hendricks had signed it that afternoon. The sheriff was scheduled for 10 a.m. on the 30th day, exactly as the law required. I stood in my apartment kitchen reading the email on my phone. 30 days had seemed long when I'd handed Amos that manila envelope. Now they'd passed like water through fingers. The 30th day arrived like clockwork. I stood in Kowalski's office reviewing the final eviction order, signed by Judge Hendricks. The sheriff was scheduled for 10 a.m. I would be there to witness it. The morning arrived bright and inappropriately beautiful. Florida sunshine, clear sky, temperature already climbing toward 80 degrees. I stood in the driveway of my own house at 9:45, waiting beside my Mercedes. The sheriff's vehicle pulled up at 9:53. Deputy Marcus Chen stepped out, official eviction order in hand. Behind him, Derek Morrison's sedan parked on the street, the realtor I'd hired to assess the property's value. A notary public emerged from Morrison's passenger seat, carrying a clipboard and inventory forms. Deputy Chen nodded at me, professional courtesy. We'd spoken by phone the day before to coordinate timing. He walked to the front door and knocked firmly. Sheriff's Department. I have an eviction order for Amos Wallace and Celeste Wallace. Open the door, or I will be forced to make entry. Silence. Then muffled voices inside. An argument. Celeste's voice rising, panicked. Amos saying something I couldn't hear through the wood. Chen knocked again, harder. This is your final warning. Open the door. The lock clicked. The door opened. Amos stood there in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, unshaven, eyes red from either anger or sleeplessness. Behind him, the house looked chaotic. Boxes started but not finished. Clothes draped over furniture, dishes in the sink visible from the doorway. 30 days' notice, and they'd barely packed. "This is harassment," Amos said, voice tight. "We have rights." Chen held up the eviction order. "You have 2 hours to remove personal belongings. Personal clothing and documented gifts only. Everything else remains property of the homeowner." He gestured to the notary. "This is Mrs. Patterson. She'll document what you remove to prevent any future disputes." I stayed back near the driveway, letting Chen handle the procedure. Morrison stood beside me, taking notes about the property's condition. The morning sun cast long shadows across the lawn I'd mowed for 37 years. Amos and Celeste disappeared inside. Sounds of frantic movement followed, drawers opening, closets being ransacked, voices arguing about what to take first. The notary entered with her clipboard, positioned herself in the living room where she could observe. 15 minutes later, Celeste emerged carrying the Chinese vase from the living room, blue and white porcelain, hand-painted, worth more than most people's monthly rent. "This was a gift," her voice trembled. "Meredith gave this to me before she died." I walked to my car, opened the trunk, and retrieved a folder I'd prepared the night before, organized by room, then by item value. I flipped to the living room section, pulled out a receipt, and walked back to where Celeste stood, frozen in the doorway. "I bought that vase in 2015 from Chen's Antiques." I showed her the receipt, then showed it to the notary. $2,800. My credit card. My property. Celeste's face crumpled. She set the vase down roughly on the entry table. I winced, hoping it didn't crack, and went back inside. The pattern repeated. Jewelry armoire from the bedroom. $1,200. I had the receipt. Landscape painting from the hallway. $3,500. Purchased at a gallery opening Meredith and I had attended. Designer chair Celeste claimed was a wedding gift from us. $4,000. My purchase. My choice. Placed in our guest room that they'd commandeered. Each time, I produced documentation. Each time, Mrs. Patterson marked her clipboard. Denied. Homeowner property. Documented purchase. Amos's control shattered around 11:30. He came charging out of the bedroom, carrying a box of items the notary had already rejected, saw me standing calmly in the hallway, reviewing my receipt folder, and something inside him broke completely. He dropped the box, lunged, grabbed my shirt with both hands, and shoved me backward against the wall. "You miserable old man." His face was inches from mine, spit flying with each word. "You're stealing our lives." Chen moved faster than I expected for a man his size, had Amos's arms pinned behind his back within 3 seconds. "Hands off! Do that again and you're under arrest for assault." I straightened my shirt, said nothing, looked at Amos until he looked away. "You have 1 hour remaining," Chen said quietly, still restraining him. "I suggest you use it for packing, not assaulting people." He released Amos slowly. Amos stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched at his sides, but he didn't move toward me again. The last hour passed in tense silence. Celeste crying in the bedroom, Amos throwing clothes into garbage bags with violent, jerky movements, the notary documenting everything with detached professionalism. At 12:15, a rental truck pulled up to the curb. Borrowed from a friend, probably, too small to be from a commercial company. Amos and Celeste loaded it with pathetically little. Suitcases of clothing, some kitchen items that were genuinely theirs from before they moved in. A lamp, a coffee maker, 8 years of living reduced to what filled half of a 10-foot truck bed. They didn't look at me as they finished loading. Celeste got in the passenger seat, face buried in her hands. Amos stood by the driver's door, staring at the house. Our eyes met across the driveway. "You'll regret this," he said, not shouting anymore, just stating it like fact. "I promise you'll regret this." 2:00, I replied calmly. "That's when the locks change. Don't come back." He got in the truck, started the engine, drove away without looking back. The sound of the engine faded down Osprey Lane until silence returned. I stood on the threshold of my house. My house. The furniture remained, all of it mine, purchased with my money over decades. But the personal presence was gone. Amos's jacket no longer on the coat rack. Celeste's magazines no longer on the coffee table. The air itself felt different, lighter, emptier. I walked through each room methodically. Bedroom where they'd slept in my guest bed. Kitchen where they'd eaten food I'd paid for. Living room where they'd watched television on my subscription services. Every space felt like it was exhaling after holding its breath for 8 years. At 1:30, the locksmith arrived. By 2:15, every lock was changed. New keys in my pocket. Old keys worthless pieces of metal wherever Amos had thrown them. I stood in the doorway one more time as the locksmith drove away, looked out at the empty driveway, the quiet street, the ordinary afternoon continuing around me. Then I turned back into the house and closed the door firmly. The sound of that lock clicking into place felt like the final word in a very long argument. Dr. Sarah Martinez called that evening as I sat in the rental apartment, reading through property inspection documents Morrison had left. "Norbert, I need to warn you about something." Her voice carried that careful tone people use when delivering bad news. "Amos gave an interview to the Coastal Observer. David Preston's writing the article. It's going to be unflattering." The Coastal Observer was Sarasota's weekly newspaper. David Preston specialized in human interest pieces that leaned heavily on emotional manipulation. I'd seen his work, sensational headlines, selective fact presentation, quotes taken out of context to create maximum drama. "When does it publish?" "Tomorrow morning. I wanted you to know before you saw it." I thanked her and ended the call. Spent the rest of the evening finishing Morrison's paperwork. Whatever Amos had told Preston, whatever narrative he'd constructed, wouldn't change the legal reality. The eviction was final. The house was mine. Facts didn't care about newspaper articles. The article appeared in Thursday's edition. A colleague left a copy in my office mailbox with a sticky note. "Don't let this get to you." The headline read, "Local man forced from family home. Claims father's calculated cruelty." Preston had written exactly what I'd expected. Amos painted as the devoted son, caring for his aging father after the mother's tragic death, forced onto the street with nowhere to go. The father portrayed as cold, vindictive, motivated by unspecified grudges. Celeste quoted extensively about abandonment and betrayal. No mention of the 8 years of financial exploitation. No mention of the documented theft. No mention of the court ruling that found zero legal merit in Amos's claims. Selective truth presented as complete story. It was masterful manipulation. By noon, my phone started ringing. Colleagues checking on me. Patients leaving voicemails. The medical community had seen the article, and they were not impressed. Dr. James Morrison sent me a letter he'd submitted to the Observer. "I've known Norbert Wallace for 23 years. I watched him care for his wife through 2 years of terminal illness, without once complaining or asking for help. I watched his son, Amos, miss every important milestone of that illness, hospital admissions, treatment decisions, final goodbyes. To characterize Norbert as cruel is not just inaccurate, it's obscene. David Preston should be embarrassed for publishing such poorly researched propaganda." More letters flooded the newspaper. Margaret Santos, the hospice volunteer, wrote 3 paragraphs detailing Amos's absence during Meredith's final week. Linda Chen from the book club described how Norbert had personally organized memorial donations, while Amos complained about funeral costs. Former patients submitted testimonials, pro bono surgeries for uninsured children, payment plans that amounted to forgiveness, Christmas gifts for families struggling with medical bills. The Observer's online comments section exploded. Every supportive comment about Amos was buried under 50, defending me. People I didn't even know wrote detailed rebuttals, citing court records, eviction laws, adult children's lack of inheritance rights. Patricia Chen, my colleague who'd forwarded the initial Facebook screenshots, sent me another message. "The Medical Society is drafting a formal statement. 37 physicians signed it. Preston's editor called personally to apologize." I didn't respond to any of it. Didn't write letters. Didn't post comments. Didn't defend myself publicly. The truth was doing that work without my participation. 3 days after the article, Sarah Martinez called again. "Amos was fired. The dealership let him go this morning." I sat in silence for a moment, absorbing that information. Why? Multiple reasons, apparently. The clinic scene had already put him on thin ice. Then the article came out, and customers started calling, asking why they employed someone described so negatively in the community. When the counter-narrative exploded, all the letters, the testimonials, management decided he was too much of a liability. And Celeste? Word is she's leaving him, moved in with a friend, filed for separation. I thanked Sarah and hung up. Stood at the rental apartment window watching evening traffic pass on the street below. Felt no triumph, no satisfaction in Amos's continued downfall. Just a weary kind of validation that consequences were playing out logically. The article had been Amos's last strategy. Public shaming, emotional manipulation, community pressure on me to relent. It had backfired so completely that it accelerated his own destruction. Sometimes justice doesn't need your help. Sometimes it just needs you to step back and let truth work. 2 weeks after the article debacle, I received notice from the court. The civil lawsuit hearing was scheduled. $130,000. Documented and itemized. Kowalski called it a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. I drove to the courthouse early that morning, knowing this was the final legal piece. The civil courtroom felt smaller than the one where Judge Hendricks had dismissed Amos's preliminary motion 2 months earlier. Same judge, same courthouse, different stakes. I arrived 40 minutes early with Kowalski, carrying organized case files in the leather portfolio that had become a familiar weight. The morning proceeded with the methodical efficiency of legal machinery, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Judge Hendricks entered at 9:15. We rose, sat, and began. This court will now hear the civil matter of Wallace versus Wallace, case number CV 2025-1847. Hendricks adjusted her reading glasses. Mr. Kowalski, present your case. Kowalski called Susan Berg as expert witness. She connected her laptop to the courtroom display, and spreadsheets filled the screen behind her. 3 years of my financial life reduced to columns and highlighted cells. Over 36 months, the supplementary credit card ending in 4782 accumulated $47,000 in charges. Berg used a laser pointer to track down the spreadsheet. Analysis shows 0 household or emergency purchases, exclusively luxury retail, jewelry, designer clothing, spa services, high-end cosmetics. She clicked to another screen. Additionally, defendant Amos Wallace initiated 63 transfers from joint household account to his personal account, totaling $83,000, each marked as temporary loan with promise of repayment. Gregory Mills attempted cross-examination with the desperate energy of someone billing hours on a lost cause. Ms. Berg, isn't it common for parents to financially support adult children during difficult times? Berg's response came with professional precision. Support, yes. Unauthorized use of credit instruments and accounts without permission? That's financial exploitation under Florida Statute 825-103. Kowalski presented Exhibits 12 through 18, printed text messages and emails. Your Honor, I'd like to enter evidence where Mr. Amos Wallace explicitly promises repayment. Quote from text, dated March 17, 2023. I'll get you the $3,000 back by end of month, I promise. Mills tried again. These were family arrangements. My client had an understanding with his father. Counselor, Hendricks looked up from the documents. I have documented evidence of promises to repay. That establishes these as loans, not gifts, unless you have evidence contradicting this. Mills had nothing. Sat down. Amos stared at the table in front of him, jaw clenched, wearing a cheap suit that probably cost less than one of Celeste's purses. I took the witness stand when called, answered Kowalski's questions directly, factually. Did you authorize the supplementary card for these specific luxury purchases? No. I authorized it for groceries and household emergencies only. When did you discover the unauthorized charges? During the forensic audit in March. I didn't know about them until Ms. Berg documented them. Mills stood for cross-examination. Dr. Wallace, you're a wealthy man. Surely these amounts didn't cause you financial hardship. The amount is irrelevant. It was theft. The principle matters. He had no follow-up. I stepped down. Judge Hendricks called for brief recess. 15 minutes later, she returned with her decision already prepared. The evidence had been that clear. The court finds for plaintiff Dr. Norbert Wallace. Defendant Amos Wallace is liable for $95,000. She consulted her notes. Due to statute of limitations on civil recovery, $35,000 of the earliest charges cannot be recovered. The remaining $95,000 shall be paid over 3 years. First payment due within 30 days. Monthly payments of approximately $2,640 thereafter. She looked directly at Amos. Failure to maintain the payment schedule will result in wage garnishment and potential asset seizure. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck once. Final. I stood when dismissed, showed no visible reaction, no smile, no nod, just gathered my papers and followed Kowalski into the hallway. Clean victory, he said quietly. He'll be paying you for years. I'm not keeping it. The decision had been clear in my mind for weeks. Every dollar goes to the foundation. Kowalski nodded like he'd expected exactly that answer. I left through the side exit to avoid any possibility of confrontation. Drove back to the rental apartment. I still hadn't moved into the house, though the locks had been changed for 3 weeks. The place needed work first. Paint, new furniture, transformation from crime scene to home. That evening, Kowalski called. Thought you should know. Celeste filed for divorce. Official filing came through this afternoon. Quick timing. She specifically excluded herself from his debts. Smart legal move on her part. Smart woman, I said. Too bad she didn't apply that intelligence earlier. After hanging up, I stood at the apartment window watching evening traffic. Thought about Amos sitting in that courtroom, stone-faced, while the weight of consequences settled onto his shoulders. 3 years of payments, monthly reminders of theft, betrayal, exploitation, and every dollar would go to children who needed surgeries their families couldn't afford. Children nothing like the man Amos had become. The foundation paperwork sat on my kitchen counter, nearly complete. The Meredith Wallace Medical Foundation. 501c3, status approved. Bank account established. First consultation requests already arriving. Justice looked exactly like this. Methodical, documented, final. 3 months after the judgment, I stood on the back terrace of my house, watching morning light spread across the garden Meredith and I had planted 3 decades ago. August in Florida. Heat already building despite the early hour. The house felt different now, fresh paint throughout, furniture rearranged, the bedroom where she'd spent her final months converted into a home office. I'd sold my practice in June. 35 years of orthopedic surgery reduced to contracts and wire transfers. The foundation needed a full-time medical director, and I'd discovered I needed something beyond what the operating room could offer anymore. My phone buzzed, payment notification from the bank. Amos Wallace, $2,500 deposited, slightly under the court-ordered amount, but within the grace period Mills had negotiated. I archived the notification without reading it twice. He'd become a transaction, nothing more. Monthly reminder that consequences were mathematical and ongoing. The foundation had treated its first patient 2 weeks earlier. Maria Santos, 7 years old, clubfoot that had gone uncorrected because her family couldn't afford the surgery. 3 hours in the operating room, 6 weeks of casting. Physical therapy covered entirely by the foundation. She'd walked without limping for the first time in her life last Tuesday. Her mother had cried in my office while Maria spun in circles, testing her new gait. That memory was worth more than any amount Amos would ever repay. Inside the house, I poured coffee and reviewed case files for the foundation. 4 surgical consultations scheduled for next week. 2 spinal corrections, 1 hip dysplasia, 1 severe scoliosis. Families who'd been waiting months, sometimes years, for treatment they couldn't afford. Now they'd wait weeks instead of years. The foundation had funding for 12 surgeries this year, mostly from the sale of my practice, supplemented by donations from colleagues who'd rallied during the newspaper debacle. The hospice room where Meredith had died was gone. In its place, a bright office with large windows overlooking the garden. Desk, filing cabinets, medical references. Her photograph sat on one corner, both of us at our wedding, young and unaware of how complicated family could become. I looked at it sometimes but didn't linger. She'd be proud of the foundation. That was enough. My phone rang. Patricia Chen, my colleague and sailing instructor. Still up for this afternoon? Wind's supposed to be perfect. Absolutely. I'd taken up sailing in July, something Meredith and I had talked about doing but never found time for. Now I had nothing but time. Time to learn new skills, time to help patients through the foundation, time to rebuild life into something that felt like mine again. The house was quiet. My house. No one here but me and the memories I chose to keep. I'd offered Amos no forgiveness, no reconciliation, no second chances. The law had done its work. Justice had been served. That chapter was closed, and I'd moved on to writing new ones. Around noon, the Foundation administrator called with an update. Another family had applied for assistance. 9-year-old boy with congenital leg deformity, multiple surgeries needed. I scheduled the consultation for Thursday. This was what revenge looked like when you let it transform into something useful. Not cruelty, not ongoing bitterness, just systematic removal of exploitation and redirection of resources toward people who deserve them. I locked the house at 2:30 and drove to the marina. The sailboat Patricia had convinced me to lease waited at dock 12. Small enough for one person to handle, large enough to feel the genuine challenge of wind and water. We'd sail south along the coast, practice tacking, maybe anchor near the Keys if conditions allowed. Before leaving, I glanced once more at Meredith's photo on the office desk through the window, smiled briefly, then turned toward the car, the foundation, the sailing, the quiet house that felt like home again, new patients who needed help, new skills to learn, new chapters opening faster than I could write them. Amos was somewhere in the city, working whatever job he'd found after losing the dealership position, making monthly payments that would stretch for 3 years. I hoped he'd learned something, suspected he hadn't. Either way, it no longer mattered. The marina waited. The afternoon stretched ahead. The wind was supposed to be perfect. I drove south with the windows down, radio playing, something I didn't recognize but enjoyed anyway. Forward motion. That's all life really required. Forward motion and purpose. I had both. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.